Take Back Your Health Now, Episode 24.
You're listening to the Take Back Your Health Now podcast, the show that interviews the top doctors, athletes, trainers, and entrepreneurs to help you find the holy grail of health. Now here's your host, Dr. Dan Margolin.
Hi, this is Dr. Dan Margolin with another segment of Take Back Your Health Now, where we pull out all the stops in search of health's holy grail. We're very excited today to have Dr. John McDougall. Dr. McDougall is a board-certified internal medicine doctor. He's taken care of over 10,000 patients personally. He's also a physician and nutrition expert who teaches better health through vegetarian cuisine. John A. McDougall, MD, has been studying, writing, and speaking out about the effects of nutrition on disease for over 30 years. Dr. John and Mary McDougall believe that people should look and feel great for a lifetime. Unfortunately, many people unknowingly compromise their health through poor dietary habits. Dr. McDougall is the founder and director of the nationally renowned McDougall Program, a 10-day residential program that he and Mary McDougall host at a luxury resort in Santa Rosa, California, where medical miracles occur through diet and lifestyle changes. Dr. McDougall, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, that's a nice introduction, and I have to say everything you said is absolutely true.
Wonderful, wonderful. We do our best to be accurate.
We do those things. You know, we just finished, today is Monday, and we just finished Friday taking care of 40 people with problems as diverse as multiple sclerosis and kidney failure and, high blood pressure. And we didn't have any type 1. We had type 2 diabetics. And you know, these people, they all left after 10 days on less medication, better looking biomarkers, like cholesterol and blood pressure, right, and feeling better. And yeah, that's what we do. And, it's all due to really, really simple, cost-free approach to their problems. That's what we do.
Well, Dr. McDougall, before we even get into how you do it, I have a question. So you started out in internal medicine. What made you go into diet? Like, how did you sort of, or was that just part of when you originally started, part of the thing, or is it something that evolved?
Really, I had no interest in diet. In fact, I was in the process of killing myself. I was, a sickly kid, constipation, stomach pains, acne-filled face. At 18, I had something unusual happen to me. Only happens to maybe 1,000 teenagers a year in the U.S. I had a massive stroke, like an old person.
At 18 years old? Wow.
Yeah, I know. At 22, I found out my cholesterol was 338. It should have been about 150, but it was 338. And I think I hit my top weight at about 24. I was about 80 pounds heavier than I am now. I'm now about 150 pounds. And I had major abdominal surgery at 25. But that was because I was eating at my parents' request to get enough protein and calcium so I wouldn't be malnourished. And as a consequence, I was a very sick kid.
What was your diet like then? What kind of proteins were you eating?
Well, I'd have eggs for breakfast, typical American diet. Mostly eggs for breakfast, and then I'd have ring bologna sandwiches for lunch, and I would have some kind of meat for dinner. Mm-hmm. Not an unusual type diet. Back when I was a kid, I remember the first fast food restaurant that came to our town, which was in Dearborn, Michigan. So, food back then, Mom had to make it, but sure, she made the food that, she was taught would be most healthiest for her family, and that is to feed them lots of milk, and I drank lots of milk.
Right.
And, just the usual stuff. And nowadays you see kids that have strokes, but even worse nowadays, there just be only an occasional fat kid in elementary school or middle school. But now about 34% of them are either obese or overweight, and the statistics are 17% are obese.
It's that high. And you're talking about high school or even pre-high school?
Intermediate school, high school, grade school. It's, about 17% of our children are obese. And of course, as our adult population since that time, it went from 14% being obese to now 38% of people are fully obese. And, this isn't just being a little fat. This is like really, really big.
Yeah, I was at a podiatry conference this weekend, and we were just walking around. It was in Cleveland, and I was walking around the Rock and Roll Museum, and I noticed that. I just said, "My God, there was so many people that were overweight. It was actually pretty shocking." So I don't remember that as a kid. I don't remember. Maybe it was just my perspective as a kid, or maybe I wasn't looking for it, but I don't remember seeing that.
No, it's changed. We have. We're eating the same kinds of foods that we did back in, say, the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
But the accessibility and the intensity of the desired ingredients has increased so much. To get food back when I was a child, my mother had to make it, or I had to throw something together.
Right.
These days, all you have to do is get in your car and roll down the window, and it appears. And the companies work as hard as they can to make the food as rich as possible. The Great American Burger contains hot dogs and hamburger and cheese and bacon and, the Great All-American Burger. I mean, it has everything that you ever had at a ballpark,
Right.
and
Right.
you put between your hands. So the food has become more intense in its fat, sugar, and calorie concentration and flavor. In fact, they have mad scientists that work for companies trying to make the food as enticing as possible. I'm serious. They do.
No, I believe you. I believe you. It's scary, actually. I'm laughing, but it's,
And they make it so cheap. You can buy I don't know. I don't buy it, so I don't know what it costs, but I see the ads once in a while. You get a taco or two for $1 or something. Anyway, it is just, it's an impossible situation. And when you look around, you see it is an impossible situation when nearly 80% of people are obese or overweight.
It's crazy. I listened to an interview with a person called the Food Babe, who one of these days I'd love to have on the show. But they were talking about beer, and they were saying they don't even brew beer anymore. It's basically a syrup that for the most of them. So even beer itself is not what we expect it to be. I don't know if you'd heard that or not, but it was just surprising to me.
I'm so busy fighting food fights, I don't get into beer fights.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So let me ask. So you. What happened at a certain point? You were sick, so you turned 25. You have the surgery. Did you start at that point looking at nutrition, or what made you start to focus on that?
What happened was this: I had a lot of sickness when I was a kid, but it wasn't that unusual. I wasn't the fattest kid in school, et cetera. What happened to me is I went through medical school, and I was a very frustrated medical student. And it was mentioned to me by a visiting professor from Uganda, Africa, a guy named Dennis Burkett. He came and gave a series of lectures through the United States. And what he told me in that lecture is that when he worked in Uganda, Africa, for 17 years, taking care of 10 million people, overseeing 1,000 hospitals, he never saw a case of hemorrhoids. He never saw colon cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, obesity, diverticulosis. He said he saw one case of gallstones in 17 years among 10 million people, and he saw one heart attack, and that was a judge who came back from London, had a heart attack in Uganda. And he told me that it was because of what the people ate in Uganda. This is an African country. They lived on a diet of grains and roots and no dairy and virtually no meat. And so it became that was the first eye-opening I had, that all these sicknesses I was taking care of weren't inevitable. And then what happened is, after I got out of my internship, I married my current partner of 45 years. And we moved to Hawaii, and I loved Hawaii, and I didn't want to leave, so I took a job on the big island of Hawaii as a sugar plantation doctor. And there I really got a big dose of what diet would do. I was taking care of first, second, third, and fourth generation Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans. And the first generation learned a diet in their youth of primarily rice and some vegetables and no dairy. and maybe a little bit of fish or chicken once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
In the first generation, they worked into their 80s and 90s and enjoyed life and were never sick. The kids started getting a little fatter and a little sicker as they went up the hill to Texas Drive-In, the home of the malasada.
Mm-hmm.
The first McDonald's came to Hilo, Hawaii in 1974, and I was one of their first and best customers. Yeah. Anyway, you got onto the third generation of these people from the Philippines, Japan, China, and Korea, and they were just as fat and sick as everybody else. So the only thing that changed in those years was what they ate. And it became obvious to me that it was the food that was sickening my patients.
And you had that was a great experiment that you had there to some degree, because this was an area that was just perfect. I mean, okay.
So it was, how could what else could you say? Their genes changed in 3 generations.
Right. Forget that.
Anyway, I went back into training because I was a very frustrated doctor. I didn't seem to be helping anybody with all the pills I was pushing and some of the surgeries I was doing. So I went back into training. I became a board certified internist. During those years, which were a little over 2 years, I became passionately involved in scientific research. I had a library right on the grounds of where I worked. And so I started studying research on food and people and disease. And I started studying research on everything. I wanted to read everything. But one of the things that I noted was this idea that rich foods, the foods of kings and queens,
Mm-hmm.
the foods that all Americans eat now, have been fattening and sickening pharaohs and priests and kings and queens and aristocrats for, 4,000 years that I know of. So, it's nothing new. It's just the number of people who can eat like an aristocrat is the difference.
Now, when you're saying rich foods, like what would define a rich food?
Well, meat.
Okay.
The peasants had to eat the barley and the rice and the potatoes and the beans and so on. It was the king and queen and pharaoh and priest who ate the chicken and the sheep and the cow. I don't know. Oh, they probably drank some mammals' milk then too. So
Mm-hmm.
the wealthy people ate the kind of foods that Americans eat now. So they're the animal foods. In fact, I'll just give you two categories. The newest book I have out is called The Healthiest Diet on the Planet. And it's a color picture book. It's a really fun little book, a big book actually. And what I'd done in that book is I put food poisoning into 2 categories. You see, it's hard for people to change. When you're a cigarette smoker, you only have to do one thing. When you're an alcoholic, you only have to do one thing. You just stop those
drinking alcohol.
Poisons. Right. When it comes to food, people are all confused. I got to cut down on this. I got to increase this. And throw a few more berries in this dish, and so they just don't know what to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of, even just doing the show. I mean, you do get some conflicting information and stuff.
Well, what I did in this book, and the way I have been teaching for several years, because human behavior is one of yes or no. It's not maybe, or it's red and green. It's not yellow. People don't do things moderately. When it comes to serious habits like cocaine addiction or heroin addiction or tobacco addiction or alcohol addiction or food addiction, you just can't have a little bite of pepperoni pizza, every other night. It just doesn't work that way. Right. So I put a.
No, I've seen. I mean, I watched this show the other day. They had this woman that was 600 pounds and she was trying to lose it. And you're right, the pepperoni pizza was the thing she kept getting drawn back to. So it's a pretty hard addiction to easily drop. It
is. But people can do it when the problem is clearly defined and they know exactly what to do. So the 2 categories of food poisoning that I have defined, which I wouldn't have defined it if I didn't believe it to be true. The 2 categories are animal foods. That means snails and snakes and fishes and cows and pigs and elephants. And oh boy, you better get the giraffe pretty soon because they're almost gone. You can't eat animals and you can't eat free oil like corn oil, olive oil, safflower oil, flaxseed oil. And so you can't eat that. And then See, when I say that, people get all upset and they say, oh, no, there's nothing for me to eat at all. That's my whole meal plan. Well, they just got to widen their view a little bit. What people eat, what the human diet is, you may call it the Holy Grail. What the diet of human beings is, has been, always will be, is a diet based on starches.
Okay.
Starches are food parts that contain lots of carbohydrate, sugar calories. Starches, for example, would be underground storage organs like potatoes and sweet potatoes. There would be above ground storage organs. These would be seeds like various kinds of grains, rice, corn, millet, or they would be legumes like beans, peas, and lentils. Now, those have been the foods of almost every person who has ever walked planet Earth. All large, successful populations of people throughout all of verifiable human history have obtained the bulk of their calories from starch. If we talk about the Aztecs and Mayans, we're talking about the people of the corn. If we talk about people from the Far East, you think about rice. If you know a little bit about South America, then you know that these people in the Andes are the potato eaters. So it's always been starch that has been the center of the human diet, except for the kings and queens. Or if you elevate half the world's population, which we have done now, to a financial status where half the people, more than half the people, can eat at Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, or prepare the same rich foods at home. So we've changed something that was once rare, fat, sick kings and queens, to an entire population of 7 billion people on this planet where half of them are dying of food poisoning.
Because they're eating the animal products. Doc, I have a question for you, just so I understand. I'm sure maybe the audience has a question too. What is the difference between a starch and a carbohydrate?
They're just different terms for describing it. Well, I'll tell you, it is of some great importance. Back when your grandmother was alive and she was getting ready to fix a meal, she would talk about the starch that you were going to have. We're going to have, our starch is going to be potatoes for this meal.
Right.
Back in 1977, when they were trying to define the dietary goals for the United States, George McGovern was involved in this, the senator from South Dakota. What happened is the food company fought back, and one of the things they did is they changed our nomenclature. They changed the words we use to describe foods. And so starch was removed from our vocabulary, and it actually was demonized. And in place of that word was complex carbohydrate.
That's what I was going to ask you. What's the difference between a complex and a simple carbohydrate?
They did it for reasons of war. If you change people's nomenclature, their words, then they can't act. So no longer was a starch called a starch. It was called a complex carbohydrate. And you look at your plate and you go, what in the heck's a complex carbohydrate? Never seen one. Don't know what to do with one. The other thing that they did, I mean, I was alive. I was there. I saw it done. The other thing they did is when they wrote guidelines, and they've done it, they do it every 5 years since 1980, the dietary guidelines for the U.S. When they mentioned the harmful things about eating meat, they don't say beef will give you a heart attack or stroke. They say saturated fat and cholesterol you shouldn't eat. You see, They won't identify, the cheese. They won't say, hey, cheese will make you stinky and constipated and give you a stroke and cancer. No, they say saturated fat and cholesterol. That's how they word the reports. See, so nobody can read it.
So it's confusing. They're basically confusing it. Yeah, understood.
So that's the difference. It's just a name so that you're fooled. Business is good at that.
Absolutely. Listen, you can look at almost any area. You can look at the Federal Reserve. You can look at almost any area they do that. They change the verbiage so you almost don't want to look at it. So you're saying that the starch is actually good for you because it's been around, and the starch would be in potatoes. It would be in many of the grains, wheat, all those things.
Well, I mean, just stop and think. The Mayan and Aztec civilizations existed for 1,300 years. They fought mighty battles. They raised their children. They marched all over that area of Central America, and they did it on corn. They're the people of the corn. Think for a minute. Almost within my lifetime, the United States of America almost lost World War II to starch eaters. And they did lose the Vietnamese conflict to starch eaters. So, see, our whole way of thinking about food, which of course has been changed by industry, is we have been taught, starch has been vilified. People say starches make you fat. Well, excuse me, if you're old enough to remember 35 years ago, there were 2 billion Asians living on rice, and you couldn't find a single fat person.
That is a good point. That's a good point.
So the industry has taught us that starches will make you fat, which is the opposite of what's true. And they've taught you must eat calcium and protein. You must seek out calcium and protein foods. But there has never, ever, ever been a case of dietary protein deficiency ever reported on any natural diet that gives you enough calories. There's never been a case of calcium deficiency ever reported on any natural diet. It doesn't exist. And when I mention omega-3 fats to you, you say fish. Well, no fish has ever made an omega-3 fat. Only plants can desaturate at the carbon-3 position. So only plants make these special fats. But see, what industry does is they take something unique about their product. It's called unique positioning. And they advertise it to the death of the customer to sell their products. And that's what's being done. Now, I want to add something here because I know this is just a short show. I want people listening to know that if you stop eating the royal food, the food of kings and queens that's giving you high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, constipation, indigestion, all those horrible things that you and your neighbors are suffering from, and you switch to a starch-based diet, your problems will go away. And our published research shows that nearly 90% of people reduce or stop all of these kinds of medications for type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, et cetera. Your body has a tremendous ability to heal, but you must feed it the human diet, which is a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables and a minimal amount of rich food. And I do this every day. I publish in the scientific medical journals. I see medical miracles happen right before my lives. I saw 40 people last week. They got their lives back in a 10-day period of time, and they got off 90% of their drugs. And most importantly, they could see that the day wouldn't be anymore that they were 250 pounds, that they would be their normal female skeletal weight of 125 pounds.
How difficult is this to switch their viewpoint? You do it. You take them away, and you do it within a 10-day period. Is that what you do?
That's the most efficient way to do it. And of course, these people are on medication, many of them, and we're real doctors, and that's the safest way to get off medication. But everything I'm sharing with you right now is on my website for free. We have
where would that be? What is the website, Doc?
It's drmcdougall.com, spelled drmcdougall.com, or just look up John McDougall Diet. I'm pretty much every place. But you want to say you could do this free at home. The recipes are there, the rules are there, the writings on diabetes, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. Everything you need to know is free on my website. You're going to walk away from there and you're going to say, "Where's the gimmick?" There's no gimmick.
Understood. No, it seems to me like you're actually doing your best to help mankind, if you would, right? You've seen something that's made people sick, and you're doing your best to sort of give some answers. There are things that you've found that are successful.
Well, that's the greatest reward in life, is helping other people. I've just been given some opportunities. I'm a medical doctor. That should say right there that my rewards will come from helping other people. But unfortunately, as a medical doctor, like other medical doctors, I was given ineffective and dangerous tools, which are most of the pills and most of the surgeries. Ineffective and dangerous.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. Well, let me ask you, when you're talking about, just to go over specific foods that we would avoid, bread, what do you feel like, how important, or is avoiding bread, white bread, whole grain, any of those things should be avoided, should not be avoided?
Bread is the staff of life.
Okay.
So bread's what has been the food of people of Europe and all of Europe, and for the last 1,000 years, it's been bread. Bread is a wonderful food. People should eat more bread. Of course, they should eat less refined bread, but bread should be a center part of your diet. I know, contrary to books by people like William Davis.
No, I've interviewed, just to hear some people I've interviewed, like Dr. Stephen Gundry, who wrote, I think, Diet Evolution, and Nora Genders and Joel Furman and stuff. So because I mean, what I've heard is like from Dr. Gundry, like the last 100 years, you've really seen this increase in arthritis. You've seen this increase in heart disease, hypertension, all these things. And it's also come at the same time that you've seen these incredibly refined wheats and breads and stuff like that. How does that fit in with what you're saying?
I know that not to be true.
Okay.
Yes, these diseases have increased tremendously, but they've increased because of the availability to millions, now billions of people, of food that was once just consumed by kings and queens.
So it's really the animal foods that you're saying to really stay away from that.
It's really the animal foods. Rheumatoid arthritis, for example, I have many cases. I tell them to change their whole diet to a starch-based diet with no added oils, no animals. But I bet if I took a group of 100 people with rheumatoid arthritis and I just told them to stop the dairy, the cow's milk, that of that 100, at least 50 would get tremendously better within 1 month. And all this is published in the scientific literature. These people who are belittling grain products, they're talking to the contrary of human history. Grains have been one of the primary foods fueling billions of people. Wheat and barley were the grains of the Middle East. Why all of a sudden did they become evil foods? I know they say some type of genetic or hybrid manipulation or something. That's nonsense. You're missing the elephant in the room.
Right. No. So you're talking about like really organic. Like I just interviewed Dr. Senef, who talks about Roundup, Monsanto being sprayed on all the corn and all the soy and all the wheat and things like that. So you're talking more of an organic based.
No, it's not the problem. Monsanto's evil. Monsanto puts all kinds of horrible things on the food, but it's not causing heart disease, not causing obesity. They're not causing rheumatoid arthritis. They're not causing multiple sclerosis. All these diseases were active in the royalty of the past thousands of years ago, before people even had the letters.
Well, even gout was called the rich man's disease, right?
Yeah, well, they didn't eat Monsanto.
Right. No, I'm just saying gout was, which we see. I'm a podiatrist, so we see this a lot. And we actually see it related to some high red meats and things like that.
And what has gout been taught as? The disease of the aristocrats, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's called the rich man's disease.
Yeah, and what it's eating from rich food. And the rich food happens to be the animal foods.
Gotcha. Well, Dr. McDougall, we're in search of the holy grail of health. So if I were to put that question to you, like what in your viewpoint is the holy grail of health? What would that be, sir?
Well, people are naturally healthy, okay? Even though they don't look it or feel it, and our medical costs don't seem to reflect that, the human being is designed to survive and be healthy. To accomplish these natural states of the human being, first of all, you got to feed it right. And second of all, you have to walk it around a little bit and get it a little bit of sunshine. So those are the most important things. Now, how do you feed a human being correctly? Well, let me give you some examples of well-fed human beings. The gladiators of old, in a place that's now the country of Turkey, their burial plots have recently been discovered, and they've analyzed the bones of the gladiators. And they can tell what gladiators ate based upon the mineral content of their bones. And what they find from these archaeologic diggings is they find that the gladiators ate a vegan diet of barley, primarily with some beans. Okay, and if you look at the historical accounts of gladiators, you find that their diet is a diet of barley and beans. They're referred to as the barley men. Now, why did they eat barley? Now, these were the rock stars of those ages. They were the most important men. They were the entertainers. So they were extremely well taken care of by the men that owned them. And so the men that owned them wanted them to win. They wanted them to endure. They wanted them to be strong. And so they fed them a diet of wheat and barley with no meat. Marathon runners, triathlon runners, winners today, since 1986, 40% of the winners have been Kenyans and Ethiopians. 80% of their diet is corn. So the Holy Grail is that you need to obtain the bulk of your calories from starch. That could be rice. Potatoes are my favorite. In fact, tonight, Mary's going to make mashed potatoes, corn, and gravy, and that will be our dinner. I was at the store with her yesterday, and she bought 4 nice-sized sweet potatoes, and we'll have sweet potatoes and broccolini some night this week for dinner. You need to eat primarily starch, be it grains or potatoes.
Doctor, what about things like spinach, lettuce, any of those kind of things? So how important are those kind of vegetables?
These are non-starchy vegetables. There's a whole sect of people out there who consider themselves nutritarians. They're going to try and get as much vitamin, mineral, and other nutrient material in themselves as possible. So they're trying to live on kale and broccoli and sprouts. They're starving to death. They're starving to death. You can't do that. No population ever did that. Plus, they're very expensive items. Potatoes are cheap. You can get 20 pounds of potatoes for $10 at Costco. You get 50 pounds of rice for $25 at Costco. We're talking about extremely inexpensive, highly satisfying food that people love. People don't really like bitter broccoli.
But are you saying, like, do you think that you would need no broccoli? I mean, if I were to ask you, like, what your diet would look like, what ideal diet would look like for somebody, would it be just give me a quick breakfast, lunch, dinner? What would that look like?
Well, first of all, you can live on potatoes and water. That's all you need. It gives you everything you want in terms of vitamins, minerals, potatoes, and water. That's how simple a starch-based diet can be. If you live on grains and legumes, you must add a little bit of vitamin A and C, so you'd have to add a flowerette of broccoli or a slice of orange to get that A and C. A typical diet for Mary and I, every morning we have oatmeal and blueberries every morning. Just have it. It could be that we have some other grain cereal, or maybe we have hash brown potatoes cooked without oil. That would be breakfast in the past. We don't do that now. We will have, let's not talk about lunch, because lunch is usually leftovers or we're out, and we'll pick up a bean burrito from a place that has whole beans, and we'll have corn tortilla, bean burrito, maybe if they have clean rice and some lettuce and so on. And then dinner will be mashed potatoes and corn and gravy. Or Mary makes, she has a crock pot, and she makes this soup or stew, bean soup or pea stew or something like that. And then she cuts up fresh new potatoes, those little potatoes, and puts that bean mixture over the potatoes with a little sriracha sauce, and we'll have a couple bowls of that for dinner.
Wow. That's definitely, you know what, you're definitely changing viewpoints, because I have not heard this. So I absolutely appreciate your taking the time to go over this and definitely shed some light on something that's definitely not out there. I mean, most of the diets, most of the people I've spoken to definitely have a different viewpoint. Dr. McDougall, how would people get in touch with you if they want to know more about you, sir?
I have a very, very usable, dense, in terms of information website. It's drmcdougall.com. And there, as I say, pretty much everything's free. Everything you want to do is free. All the scientific medical writings that I have are free there. There must be 500-600 recipes. There's a 12-day menu plan. We have a discussion board. There are things that aren't free, like my 10-day program, where my doctors, the doctors who work for me, take care of patients, and we get them off their medications when we can, which is almost all the time. And then we do weekends, intensive weekends, where just our staff teaches. We have one coming up in May. And then we also do adventure travel trips. We took about 8 months ago, we took 60 people to Alaska. About 6 months ago, we took 150 people to Kauai.
Wow!
Wow! Yeah, we do lots of things, and quickly people, as soon as they start eating the food, they say, "Boy, I love potatoes. Oh, I love rice. I love bread." Well, why would you love these things if they weren't good for you? And then you give them a piece of meat. Don't cook it. Don't cover it with barbecue sauce. Just give them a piece of sliced chicken wing and ask them how much they love it. They'll tell you they can't eat it. Give them some saltless cheese. Give them cheese without salt. They'll say that tastes like a glob of grease. I can't eat it. Wow. So, people are not only missing a good appearance and good health, they're missing good dining, a great pasta dish they could have. Pasta is comfort food. They love pasta.
That's true. That's true.
Mushu vegetables over rice, rice sushi dishes, udon vegetable soup. Mary has published almost 4,000 recipes. And
wow.
We have an app. We have a mobile McDougall cookbook app for $4.99 that has 1,025 recipes in it. It's a great app.
What's the name of the app?
The McDougall mobile cookbook app. $4.99. You get 1,025 recipes plus a whole bunch of other goodies. It's a great app.
That's great. Dr. McDougall, I want to thank you so much, sir, for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Well, good. I hope it was an eye-opener for you.
It definitely was an eye-opener. That I could say. Absolutely.
This episode is sponsored by New Jersey Foot and Ankle Center in Oradell, New Jersey. Remember, when you have a foot problem, you've got a foot doctor in the family. Weekend and evening appointments are available. Call us at 201-261-9445. Once again, that's 201-261-9445. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes over at drdanspeaks.com. If you're loving the show, head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time. Voiceovers for this episode were provided by Randy Ramos Jr. To see and hear more of his work, visit randyramosjr.com. jr.com.